This is a video about the Hermes tree, about one particular description of the Hermes tree, which I found in a manuscript now housed in St. Petersburg at the Russian National Library, Arabic and Hebrew characters. I will talk a bit about the Hermes tree as it's known from other sources, then present the description in the St. Petersburg manuscript, and give you some of my ideas, or share with you some of my ideas as to what it's all about. So the manuscript that we're talking about is found in St. Petersburg. It's classified as Еврейский, Arabsky, that's Arabic and Hebrew characters, 12246. It's a huge, but unfortunately quite defective anthology of texts in Arabic that cover a wide spectrum of topics, recipes, theories, and so forth that are grouped under the rubric of alchemy. You see, there's been quite a bit of discussion and debate, and sometimes some, pretty rigid stances taken by scholars as to what alchemy is and what it isn't. Is it proto-chemistry? Is it an alternative theory of nature? Is it simply an allegory for human spiritual development? Or are there just practical metallurgy and mineralogy? All of these things have been put forward, and there are alchemical texts that can support all of them. And I happen to think that they're all correct, and anthologies such as the one from which the text I'll be talking about is drawn support the idea that alchemy is a very broad rubric in which many of these different things are included, and this will actually lead me towards my conclusion with regard to the description here, that it fits into two such rubrics. We'll see as we get along. Now, here's simply a sample page from the manuscript. This is what it looks like. The manuscript is apparently dated from the 17th century, though I suspect that most of the texts are quite a bit earlier. I don't know, the name of the copyist is not known, and frankly, I get involved in these codical details only to, as the research progresses towards its goal. At the moment, my first goal is always to understand the content, and particularly challenging here because of the defective state of the manuscript. Now you can see here in the upper right-hand corner, I've circled a few in here in the upper left-hand corner. These are serial numberings in Hebrew characters for the recipes. So whoever put this together, really wanted it to be organized as a book, even though I can't see just now any rhyme or reason to the way it's organized. Now, the numbering on the right-hand side, the first two, the ones that are circled, are 82 and 83. And the first on the left-hand side in the upper corner is 101, which means that at least a leaf has fallen out. The bottom one on the right-hand side is 89. So this means that the big long passage at the bottom of the right-hand side is missing, and the beginning of the long passage on the top and the left-hand side is missing. And this plagues this manuscript throughout. Not all of the entries, not all the recipes are that interesting, but some of the ones that are the most interesting are simply cut off, and one doesn't have the full text to work with. Fortunately, the Hermes tree is the full recipe is found, though there are still a couple of words that I haven't quite figured out. Now, the Hermes tree, also known as the tree of the philosophers, the tree of Hesperides, also Diana's tree, are recurring representations in Renaissance and early modern alchemical texts, which recount attempts to make the elixir. They do not make, the Hermes tree does not give you elixir, but it gives you something which is an important critical step towards obtaining the elixir. Lawrence Principe, an important historian of chemistry, alchemy, and a chemist, who has studied these texts, suggests three alternative reasons for the image of a tree that's used in describing how this thing is made. One, it's simply a common alchemical analog for the production or growth of gold. According to ancient and medieval theories, according to many of them, metals grow in the earth. They are an analog to the growth of vegetation above the earth. And the alchemist, at least in some part of his work, is trying to grow gold in the laboratory. It's also a manifestation of Jung's collective unconscious, an important aspect that I will not go into here. And what interests Principi the most is that it's an appropriate image for an experiment that can be reproduced again and again by different chemists working at different times and in different locations and achieve the same results. Now, being, an old timer, my notion of what makes science and different from other branches of knowledge, well, one key factor is the ability to reproduce the results that are claimed by other scientists. If a scientist claims that a procedure of taking metals and other substances, mixing them, boiling them, distilling them, and so on, will in the end give you a certain product, you don't have to take his word for it. It's not like he's gotten a message from heaven or seen something in a dream or has access to some, supernal world, some spiritual worlds that we don't have access to. No, you can check it. You can go to your lab, take the same ingredients, and see if you get the same thing. And this is exactly what happens with the Hermes tree. This is what made Principi very interested, particularly when he succeeded in his own laboratory to grow something like what these alchemists described. And actually, since the 1960s, researchers have tried to imitate or go through the procedures that are described in these texts, and they get these type of things, which, as you can see here, they're taken from the Wikimedia Commons article on the Diana's tree. These are alchemical trees that have all been grown in modern laboratories, following the instructions in early modern texts. Now, they may not look like a tree, but if you mix your ingredients and go through all the stages that the alchemist describes, and one day you open the door to your lab and, whoa, look what you have coming out of the beaker, that's pretty impressive. And that's what's going on with this tree in the text that Principi has studied. Now, I've been talking about as I said, I'll be talking about a text on the Hermes tree in a manuscript that's written in Arabic and reproduces many alchemical recipes taken from the Arabic literature on the subject, which is actually quite vast. The only scholarly work I've seen on the Hermes tree in Arabic writings come from some publications of a scholar by the name of Paula Carusi, who studied a tadbir. In the alchemical context, tadbir Hermes means a procedure that's ascribed to Hermes. And again, as in the Renaissance text, this procedure is meant to yield not the elixir, but something that's needed to get to the elixir. And in her text, Hermes is said to have said, they express themselves, that is the ancient wise people, in different ways concerning the stone of the sages from which one obtains the great elixir. However, I have placed a tree for you at the western wall of the temple. Its branches are emerald green and its leaves are gold. Whoever can dissolve it in the solution of the sages will obtain what they have obtained. So it's basically the same idea that is of producing something that's an important step towards the elixir. She also mentions, Carusi, a Persian treatise, Risalas al-Shajara min Kal Hermes al-Hakim, which she's studying, but as far as I know, she has not yet published the results of that research. Now, here's just a snippet of how the passage on the Hermes tree looks in the St. Petersburg manuscript. I'll now move straight away towards my provisional translation of the recipe or of the tree and what it does with it. It's item number 265. I mentioned the serial numbering in this manuscript. A description of the Hermes tree. It grows in the Egyptian districts of El Arish, Gaza, Idku, Alexandria, and the entire sandy littoral. It has a bulb like squill. It is utilized as is, liquid of its root, its leaf and branches. Wise men say that hardly anything resembles this herb whose action is wondrous. Cast it upon burning coals, and it will flow like lead flows. After it flows off, there remains something like white flour. It should be mixed with ground leafy alum, that is arsenic. They pound it evenly. It is to be kneaded with good olive oil, and this should be done or placed in a pharaonic flask. Take its bonded product, this wussel means to bond, to unite, and so I think the wussel here is simply the compound that has been bonded by these procedures, and let it rot in olive oil for 2 weeks. There will remain something like iron slag, and it is to be finely pulverized. 1 mithqal, that's a certain weight, 1 mithqal of it should be cast upon 100 mithqals of, and here's a word which is smeared in the manuscript. I think it means something like low grade or degenerate or contaminated silver, of full weight, and it will become first-class gold, red, like the Egyptian gold. Hermes also mentioned that it will repair every defect and will have the status of mineral gold. It will help in the case of contamination, as an admixture of foreign materials to the precious metal, or crack when it is rubbed in together with good olive oil. It will be good for its moment and its hour, which I think means that the gold that one sees in the object that's been treated with the substance, the gold sheen, does not last all that long. You have heard about it, so seek it out and you will find it. It is found in Arish at all times, and it does not perish. That is, it's a perennial plant. Now, what I'd like to do here, going back to what I said earlier, is to divide the parts of this recipe into 2 parts. One are the alchemical part, or what I would actually call the alchemical rhetoric, which makes us, a perfect candidate for an alchemical text. And then what I will call the real world part, we're trying to see what are the active ingredients in this compound that is made, and can they be expected to produce anything like what the text predicts it will produce. So the alchemical rhetoric is, of course, the fact that there's nothing like it. Its action is wondrous. The idea that the resulting product is first-class gold, red, because that's what the best gold was said to be, red gold. And a real giveaway, the alchemical decnama, code name for arsenic, which is alum. So all of these rhetorical aspects of the recipe point to its being quite at home in the alchemical literature of the period. But then we get the real world aspects. First, the relatively precise botanical description of the tree. The text studied by Principia talk about the tree being found in the Garden of Eden. Well, good luck trying to find it there. Or, nothing specific where you can go out and know what to look for and where to look for it and when to look for it. Same with the text, the Tadbir of Hermes, which Carusi published, and which speaks of a tree that Hermes has planted next to a temple in Egypt. Of course, temple long gone, and so the tree. Here we have a botanical description giving the range of the tree. That's basically the northern littoral of the Sinai Peninsula. A description of its fruit. It looks like a squill. Another botanical fact that's perennial, and a confident statement by the author that you go out and go to El Arish and you'll find it. So, that's pretty limiting. That's pretty, it's not quite the precise botanical definitions and descriptions that you find in, modern day handbooks, but a perennial plant on the northern coast of the Sinai Peninsula with a fruit like squill, that's getting pretty specific. Then, as far as the claims, after making these, this alchemical bluster of being wondrous and producing the finest gold, towards the end of the passage, we have much more modest claims that one can begin to suggest, to wonder if they are correct. It repairs defects if you have maybe a vessel made of precious metal that has some crack or something that's been mixed in with it, maybe a piece of ore or a piece of electrum or something that you think is gold, but it doesn't look like gold. And that's a relatively modest claim to be made. Now, is there anything to this modest claim? Because of course, even to say that you rub this powder, you mix it with olive oil and rub it into a piece of metal that's been tarnished or whatever, and it'll look like gold, that's still something that has to be shown to be true. Well, the two active ingredients in this compound are arsenic and the squill, the fruit of the Hermes tree. Now, with regard to arsenic, it happens in a paper or a study published just recently, produced by a laboratory in Grenoble in France, funded by the European Union, a very huge, well-equipped, expensive nanotechnology laboratory. Scientists offered an explanation how arsenic in sufficient concentrations binds gold. So it's at least plausible that naturally occurring electrum, for example, which because of its color and its actual silver content would look to be silver, but when someone treats that compound by this recipe, the arsenic brings out, it concentrates the gold content, and to the observer, this looks like the silver has been converted to gold. I think that's a modest claim, which could actually be true. Here you have the report. You can see here in the upper left-hand corner, it's from July 5th, 2021. Researchers discover why gold is concentrated alongside arsenic. And the lead researcher says on line 2, our results show that arsenic drives the concentration of gold. This arsenic-driven gold pump explains how these iron sulfides can massively capture and then release gold, so controlling ore deposit formation and distribution. Arsenic-driven gold pump, that sounds to me like an alchemist speaking. The text we're studying uses the alchemical ducknama alam, but there is also sort of the scientific name in Arabic for arsenic, which is zarnich. And there is a class of recipes in alchemical literature called zinichiyat, which are compounds that are used in alchemical processes in which arsenic is the active ingredient. And now we can see why. These people were not simply suicidal, but apparently arsenic does have some effect in bringing out gold, concentrating it, making it visible to the client of the alchemist, should there be any. Now, what about the plant from the Hermes tree? Well, the sea squill, Ergonia maritima, is found to this day on the Mediterranean coast of Sinai. There was a study published several decades ago by an Egyptian botanist who did a survey of the plant life in the Sinai Peninsula. He found to his surprise that nearly half of the plants had some medicinal value, where had some sort of active agent that has some therapeutic properties. And he found, but among the plants he lists there is a squill, which he finds on the northern coast the sandy literal as described in the text, and it's perennial. So it meets all the criteria that our text has set down. Now, why would this have been included in the recipe? Well, here I'm making sort of making an educated guess that the alchemist thought in an associative matter, associatively. That is to say, if the alchemist had known from previous work in his field that arsenic does bring out the gold in sort of, mixtures that have some gold content, the alchemist may have reasoned, well, maybe poisons bring out gold. Maybe there's something so sharp in poisons that they bring out the gold. And therefore, why don't I add a vegetable poison, and maybe it'll, there'll be some synergetic effect, and it'll be even more powerful. Now, squilla was used since antiquity as a rat poison. And so the alchemists may have thought that it had properties similar to those of arsenic. So we have here, at least I think, a plausible reason. It's at least plausible that this compound would have brought out the gold content in various objects or hunks of metal or damaged vessels that had some gold content, at least for its moment and its hour. But as always, this presentation must end, like all scholarly research does, with the convocation, more work needs to be done. Thank you very much. I hope you like this video.